It's been a long and challenging development journey. 230 days is no joke for anyone doing anything, but every single moment, moments of frustration, tediousness, trial and error, not knowing where I'm going, it's all mattered. One of the most recurring themes in Strife and Serenity is to keep moving forward, which is kind of ironic because I was so close to quitting so many times. The game is built around conflict, internal, external, cosmic, and when you spend every day creating a world defined by struggle, it's easy to start reflecting those struggles in yourself. A lot of that struggle came from stepping out of my comfort zone. I've worked on projects before, sure, but never like this. This one had weight, a deadline, expectations, eyes on it. It wasn't just about creating something cool anymore. It was about finishing something meaningful under pressure. And along with that, saying something. And funnily enough, it wasn't just the idea of conflict, but also the idea of comfort and losing it that sparked the idea. The tension between what's easy and what's necessary, between what you were trained to be and what the world now demands of you. That is where it began. A story about a people or a person realizing that holding on to old ideals might not be enough to shape the future. And from that realization, a question: what do you do when the very thing you stood for no longer works? That was a seed. And from that seed, Strife and Serenity began to grow. Behind the scenes, things got tough early on. I had the idea of Strife and Serenity long before I was even supposed to. I spent the summer before the academic year thinking about what my final major project might be. Admittedly, I thought I was ahead of the game, but when it finally came to sitting down and developing it, I hit a wall. To put it simply, this was because it wasn't really a game idea. It was just an idea, a vague concept without any shape, nothing to hold it up. That's when the first major turning point came, in the form of an exercise, one designed to help us find the core of what we were trying to make. The exercise was split into 4 phases, and by the end of it, we had 3 potential game ideas, and there it was, my structure, a game built around conflict, but not in the obvious sense. Through that process, I uncovered the themes that I didn't know were buried in the concept: mystery, imbalance, the weight of responsibility, and the need to act even when it means letting go of everything that once felt safe. And that's when the idea of comfort zones came back in. I was always fascinated by the trope of a character forced to abandon who they are, someone peaceful or idealistic because the world around them no longer allows that luxury. From the start, I always knew my final major project would be narrative driven. That much was non-negotiable. And with this refined concept, the spark of a story that now had real potential, I finally felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. I didn't have all the answers just yet, but I had something to work with. Further developing the story would come in time, but now stood my next challenge. How would I turn a story into a game? I knew I didn't want to make a visual novel. As much as I respect that genre, it just wasn't what I envisioned. I didn't want players to just sit, click, and read. I wanted them to move. I didn't just want a story with a goal. I wanted gameplay that reflected and complemented the journey towards that goal. But it wasn't just about giving the protagonist something to fight for. I wanted the player to care too. Way back in my early pitch for Mark of Mastery, a game idea that helped shape what would become Strife and Serenity, I said something that stuck with me to this day. In my personal opinion, the best way to tell a story is without actually telling it. I carried that principle into this project. I wanted to tell the player just enough to get them invested, but not everything. That was the seed of the story, a main character setting out with one clear objective: to find their friend. Early on, they receive a lead, just enough to push them forward, and from there, the gameplay begins. The player starts their journey towards that place, searching for answers while navigating obstacles along the way. That one random idea about the soldier sparked even more questions. Who are these soldiers, and what are they fighting for? What if they weren't soldiers at all? What if they were meant to be something else entirely? Peacekeepers, guardians of harmony, or serenity, who are now forced to take up arms, not out of bloodlust or glory, but out of necessity, to survive, to protect, to one day reclaim a lost piece that they thought would last forever. Additionally, what if the protagonist wasn't a soldier, like the rest of their people? What if they rejected that path entirely? Someone who clung to who they once used to be and who their people used to be. Someone who deep down knows that in order to keep moving forward, they would need to change into something they spent so long avoiding. That's when everything started to flow. As the player progressed, they would have opportunities to learn more about the world around them. It was no longer just a story, it was becoming a game. But what good is a story-driven game without its characters? I think I had the most fun designing the characters, their personalities, their dynamics, their backstories, all of it. Not to mention that when it comes to their interactions, there's something really satisfying about making dialogue flow smoothly, finding that balance between seriousness and a bit of baffle. To get that tone right, I actually took a step back for a while and spent some time replaying my favorite games and rewatching some of my favorite movies, especially the ones where the dialogue stood out. I paid attention to the conversations between some of my favorite characters, how tension was built and released, and how even the smallest line could carry weight when thought through from beginning to end. That's what I wanted to bring to Strife and Serenity, not just good writing, but writing that felt alive. Aside from Casifo, who's the main character, I think the character that I had the most fun writing was Riley. She's one of those curious, mysterious strangers that Casifo encounters early on, and I don't know what it was exactly. There was something about writing this quirky, upbeat girl that just felt refreshing. And since my personality is much more different from hers, stepping into that headspace was completely out of my comfort zone. And honestly, that made it more enjoyable. Her dynamic with Zephyrax, the other major companion that Casifo meets, added even more depth. There's this kind of brotherly, almost fatherly connection between them that I didn't expect to fall into place so naturally. And when you put them next to Casifo with all this cold, detached, I don't care energy, it creates this contrast that just works. It keeps the players intrigued because you want to see these characters slowly chip away at him to draw something more human out of someone who tries not to feel anything. That feeling came from me as a player, remembering how I'd want to see a certain protagonist from a certain game break character and let something in. That's what gave me the push to shape Casifo that way. I wanted players to feel the same way that I felt. There's something just so fun about watching cold characters stumble into warmth in a world that keeps pushing them towards connection, whether they like it or not. But what really deepens Casifo as a character is his connection to Mara, the soldier who went missing. She's not just a lead to follow or a name in a file. She's someone important, a close friend, maybe the only one he has left after a mysterious event took the lives of so many he once held close. That quiet grief that sits beneath everything that he does, it explains the distance, the indifference, the way he shrugs things off. It's a defense, and that's what makes the journey feel personal. Not just for him, but for the player too. Because suddenly, it's not just about reaching a goal, it's about saving something, saving someone, maybe the last person that matters to him. So when he sets off to find Mara, we're not just following him, we're walking with him, both of us chasing the same answer. What happened to her? And more importantly, can she still be saved? In order to find that truth, we as a player needed to keep moving forward, and that brings me to the next major challenge that I faced. The story was coming together, all of it felt strong, but this was a game about conflict. Going back to my original question about how to make a game, not just a story, I had to ask myself, what was still missing? What could I do to elevate the experience? Something that would give the game more of an edge. From the start, I had these big ideas. Objectives that would update as soon as you open chests or activate terminals. Then there were the climbing mechanics, the balance mechanics, the grappling mechanics, and even the ability system. Even though the mechanics were really punishing, they were also the most rewarding. My favorite mechanic by far is the adaptive combat system. Each time Casifo successfully lands an ability on an enemy, it fills a gauge, and once that gauge is full, his combat level rises. He becomes faster and stronger, and his abilities evolve, inflicting status effects, dealing more damage, and unlocking new effects. Designing the system meant a lot to me, not just because it was fun, but because it reflected Casifo's character. He's not a fighter by nature, but he has to fight, because not fighting means standing still, and standing still means losing everything. So as a player, when you're thrown into combat, the more you engage and change up your strategies in battle, the stronger you become. And in that way, the mechanic becomes a message. sometimes the only way to keep moving forward is to fight. Now the gameplay no longer feels out of place in the game. It mirrors Casifo's journey on another level. He's someone trying to avoid becoming the thing he fears, but is constantly pushed into it by the world around him. It's a mechanic, yes, but it's also a narrative, and together they carry the same message at the heart of the entire game. Keep moving forward, even when it hurts. Strife and Serenity has hands down been the most intense, challenging, and ambitious project I've ever worked on. It's not just a game, it's a culmination of everything I've learned along my journey as a game designer. Every mechanic I struggled with, every story beat I obsessed over, every hour spent fixing something that broke for the third time. It all built towards this. And through that process, I've grown, not just as a developer, but as a storyteller, a problem solver, and even as a person. This project gave me a reason to revisit ideas that I once left behind and rework them into something stronger. In many ways, this game was a reflection of my journey. Every failure, every breakthrough, every creative risk. But maybe the most meaningful part of it all is the people that I met along the way, and the incredible feeling of watching someone play through what I've made, seeing them explore, react, feel something. That's something I'll never forget. There were so many moments where I wanted to give up, moments where it felt like it was too much. But the world I was building, the story, these characters, this message, it all reminded me of something I needed to hear just as much as Casifo did, to keep moving forward.